Hi again. Have you ever seen a TED Talk? That's a very professional production. And only photos. Have you noticed that? The people who are talking there, the scientists, there's not a single bullet point, not a single overhead. It's either really, really high resolution photography, or it's really exciting animations. And the speakers never use manuscript, right? They're so comfortable up there. It's really impressive. In 15 minutes, they convey all their research and a really exciting story. Now, the popular science talk is my kind of platform. I do a lot of talks, and they have changed a lot over the years. I have taken classes in outreach. I've taken classes in language, how to use my voice. I've taken classes in centering my body and not going crazy with my arms or not moving too much. Right now I'm in a studio, so I really have to stay in place and I can't walk around too much because of the microphone and the environment. Often the stage is setting basically the limitations for how you can give a talk. I want to talk a little bit about that. But first of all, I want to talk about my first experience with giving a huge popular science talk. Every year, there's a Zero conference in Oslo. This is a conference with focus on climate solutions. And I was asked to open that conference in 2012. This was a complete out-of-body experience for a scientist who up till then mostly wore lab coats or worn out jeans in front of my students. I had to dress up, and on the front row was the Crown Prince of Norway, the Prime Minister of Norway, Kofi Annan, and 1,000 people from business and politics in Oslo. I remember that I contacted the headmaster at University of Bergen and asked him, what on earth am I going to wear on a stage like that? How do I have to look? And I actually got some advice on even how to dress on stage. But what I realized is that I came to a conference producer and a production team that helped me to make a talk. The format was 10 minutes. The format was no headlines, no text, no manuscript, pure storytelling. And they really helped me to make that story. We were training on stage, we were training with cameras because it was going to be a TV production. Where to stand, how to walk on stage, how to address, how to use my body language on stage. And all in all, it helped me immensely to become a better lecturer and a better outreacher. So to meet all the people that are involved in such a production, strangely enough, even the people doing the makeup backstage, all of it is part of this immense, huge production that often take place at international conferences, not research conferences, but these kind of conferences for business and industry. It's a little bit scary, but it was a stepping stone, and it was the starting point of doing more scientific outreach. Remember in my intro movie when I stood up by the lake the other day, I was talking about ocean currents. This is how I used to show ocean currents very often in a popular science talk. And this red moving arrow that comes up along the coast of Norway or between Norway and Greenland, that is that warm ocean current that I talked about. You can almost see the rubber ducks floating up along the coast here. This is the Gulf Stream that's warming up Norway, and we clearly see the difference between the west coast of Norway and Greenland. We have a wonderful warmer environment than 3 kilometers of ice on Greenland. I thought that this is a great way of showing the ocean currents. But when I started working with production teams that wanted me to be better at presenting research, they suggested that I use this picture. Take away all the errors, take away most of the text, and take a satellite photo that they put colors on. The redder here, the warmer is the ocean. And we can clearly see this tongue of warm water that comes up the coast of Norway and goes into the Barents Sea between Spitsbergen in the north and Murmansk up there. So we can clearly see it. It's very visual, and it's maybe clearer to people. But maybe we can make it even more accurate by using satellite photos. This is the coast of Finnmark. And if you've been here in Western Norway today, you would have been part of something that's happening every spring because, of course, you would have looked at the fjords, and we might have taken a trip into the fjord regions, and the ocean would have been a unique color of aqua green, absolutely gorgeous. And what's happening is the spring bloom of small algae in the ocean surface. This is a satellite photo taken from the International Space Station. It's taken last year, and it's showing the spring bloom in the Barents Sea. And you also can see how the ocean currents are transporting this bloom into the Barents Sea. So simplifying it, making it more accurate, making figures that the audience can recognize themselves. Photos from where you are giving your talk, personal stories, all these things help you to be a better narrator. But this is also might be an interesting thing to show. I show you the rubber ducks, but this is actually this is our scientific rubber ducks. These are small buoy or instruments that we drop into the ocean, and they travel with ocean currents all over the world. So this is how we get the ocean data. This is how we know that there are ocean currents, and we know the temperature they have and the processes and roles they have in the ocean. Science outreach can be on so many platforms. Some of my colleagues have found out that social media might be the absolutely best platform to convey and disseminate their science. Many are active on Twitter, writing 140-word little or 140 sentences, small stories that has been sent out, picked up maybe by journalists, picked up by politicians, retweeted, and start living a life of their own. I think that what you have to find out is what you think is fun. I think it's fun to meet people. I like to travel to schools. I like to meet older people. I like to meet politicians. I like to meet people where they are and find out about how climate is affecting them and their thoughts about how they can contribute to change the climate that we're experiencing today. So you can communicate science in very many channels. Some also see that social media can be a meeting place, maybe for dialogue, maybe for sharing. I often follow some key scientists that are often twittering or sending out messages about new publications or about things that the media have picked up. And by following them, I automatically get updated on what's new this week or what's new today, what's happening in sciences. It's also a network that you can share through. And very often, people that I followed on Twitter, I know their face, I know what they're doing, and it's a springboard to meet people face to face. To go to a conference today, I say, "Hey, you're the guy on Twitter. I saw you. Yeah, you had a great communication." But usually, the arena that we often meet is to go to a scientific meeting where we're going to give a talk. As a student, when I signed up for scientific meetings, I always clicked off the box that said I want to give a poster presentation. But then my supervisor came in and said, no, I kind of want you to try to give an oral presentation to tick off that box too. And I was always just hoping, please, organizers, do not choose me to do oral. But then you get that message saying, we encourage your participation. Your paper has been chosen for oral presentation. And sometimes they also send a little kind of suggestion, a little recipe on how they want you to do it. In my field, it's very often 10 to 15 minutes talk. So 1 minute to do the self-introduction and topic, 2 minutes on the problem area, the need to do this research, 2 minutes on the methods, 2 minutes on the outputs, 1 minute takeaway points, and 2 minutes discussing your research. I have colleagues that are so uncertain in settings like this that they basically start with their conclusions because they know that in this short format, they're never going to be able to get through. They're never going to be able to communicate it. But you have to work on it. If you want to make a scientific talk, you have to think that maybe you can do 1 slide a minute max. Maybe 6 to 7 slides is the best that you should try to aim for if you're talking for 12 to 15 minutes. You have to be really clear about why it is interesting. You have to be really clear about what have you found out, what are the main findings of the study, and what are the conclusions. How you come to this? And also give some insights and input on what implication your research have. What advice can you give maybe to the community or to other in the field on the basis of your research? And very often the start is the real crux of giving a talk. Often you are introduced. The convener sometimes stands up and say that Our next speaker is Kikki Kleiven from the University of Bergen and the Bergen Center. She's going to talk about the ocean's role in climate change and how the Gulf Stream warms up Norway. And the young Kikki will go on stage and say, "Hi, my name is Kikki Kleiven. I'm from the University of Bergen and the Bergen Center. I'm really happy to be here today. And I'm going to give a talk about the ocean's role in climate and how the Gulf Stream warms up the west coast of Norway." That's almost a minute of my talk, and it's already been said. And to make it even worse, my first slide might even say it too, with all the logos and all the words and everything. Well, you're getting my point. You have to start right away with the main objectives of the study. Why am I showing this? And that way of communicating research is also the way you're doing popular outreach. Don't spend so much time presenting yourself or presenting the title or all the logos and all the things you think is important. Go right up and tell them why you're there and what you want to convey and what are the major findings in your study. Very often start with the major conclusions. So that nerdy guy that I met from California who always started with his conclusions, well, you know what? We always remembered his talk because we always knew what he had come up with and what the new findings was. So think about that when you're giving a presentation. As a young student, I was very, very nervous when I was presenting my research. And I was very scared of forgetting something. Later on, I realized that it's only me and maybe my supervisor who knows that there's a couple of words that are missing, or maybe I didn't get all points true. But this is a classic slide that I used to give at conferences. This slide, the idea of it was showing that volcanics and climate are connected, so a volcanic eruption would lead to a cooler planet. And to be certain of it all, I had every single figure, some citations, and all the data in there. And of course, who could ever follow such a thing? And what did I end up doing? I'm going to show you now. I ended up standing, of course, always with my back to the audience and reading up. This is also how I started lecturing at the university. I was uncertain, and I hadn't really made the story. And I hadn't really made a manuscript of what I was going to present. Today is much easier. I feel certain. I know the roles of volcanics and climate, that you have these large volcanic eruptions, you have clouds filled with small particles that are coming up in the atmosphere, and these particles are hindering the rays from the sun to hit the surface of the planet and cools the planet down. And that this enormous volcano outbreak in 1991, Mount Pinatubo, that exploded in Indonesia, led to the fact that the year of 1992, the global average temperature of the globe was 0.75 degrees cooler for 1 year. Usually I would have spent 10 minutes explaining that. So you can do it much quicker. Now on my PowerPoint here, you see I have some text. So I still have some bullet points and text that I need to make things clear. But if you can't get your ideas across, if you can't really show them, it won't get you anywhere. So there are some smart things that you have to do with PowerPoint. In order to do that, of course, I have to have some text. Usually, there's way too many slides. So when I go to a conference, often we have to send a presentation beforehand. But you're almost always allowed to change your presentation 1 or 2 days before. Usually I end up taking out 5 to 6 slides if I give a half-an-hour talk. Because very often I duplicated my slides. Very often I think that beautiful picture of the volcano, if I just had 4 more, everybody would really understand the importance of volcanoes. If I show 5 pictures of the Gulf Stream, people will really understand that this ocean current is important. Cut it down. Find one good high-resolution photo or figure that you use. And don't try to put all text on one slide. Try to divvy them out and quicker to get your point through, maybe with one headline and a title, one headline and a picture. Do not make presentation an orgy of bullet points. And I'm actually so old that I remember when PowerPoint came, when it got invented and we started using it. And in the end, I had colleagues that there were like sounds on the PowerPoint. Slides were coming in from the sides. They were turning 360 degrees around, and there were colors and things popping up. We don't do that anymore. Simple is good. And also don't compete with yourself. Don't put in crazy symbols everywhere. Don't make your presentation just a firework. Try to find your style that you're comfortable with, that in a way reflect who you are. That doesn't mean you can't be personal or showing yourself in a personal setting, either at a conference in front of students in your lab or out doing your fieldwork. But don't go overboard with it. I've taken a lot of classes on how to stand in the room, and 10 years ago I was walking around all the time. And when we started recording sometimes lectures, there was an empty blackboard and nobody knew where the lecture was because I was walking around all the time. And if you have a camera like I have now, I have a sort of little bit limited area that I can move around on. But what about a big stage? How do you train to be on a big stage? And what do you do? Well, I always show up early, even if it's just my ordinary Monday lecture or Wednesday morning. I always show up early to make sure the room looks okay, to make sure that everything is working, like this guy's got batteries. If it's in a bigger setting like a workshop, I might show up early to set the desks and tables the way I want the students to sit, the way I want them to communicate with each other. But at really big conferences, I usually try to show up an hour early. The organizers are always there. And the most important people in the room are the technical producers, the people who are starting the PowerPoints, they're putting the mic on you, that are making sure that you are professional on stage. I always show up early. I ask them to start my presentation so I can see it from the back of the room, that it looks okay. I run through it on stage very quickly, clicking through it to familiarize with this, make sure that I don't go, stopping the presentation or going backwards instead of frontwards. I check how it is to walk up on stage. There is a reason why you don't see it now, but I always have flat heels. I'm very tall and I'm big, and I realized that walking on high heels up and down on a stage can very easily make you fall. So you have to be familiar and you have to be confident when you walk up on stage. If you have a manuscript, where should you put it? If they don't have a table, please ask for one if you need it. Familiarize yourself with the room. Find out where you're going to sit and how long it takes you to get up and down from stage. So familiarize yourself with the room. Put your bag and maybe a scarf or a coat in your seat and think about it when you're sitting up there. So that is my home. When this is over, when the scary part of giving the talk is done, I can go down and sit. One of the first talks I gave scientifically after the Zero conference was to the whole ice core community in the world. And these are fierce people. And I was very, very nervous. And I met an old Danish professor who knew and saw that I was extremely nervous. He probably saw me going to the bathroom 5 times and drinking coffee and being very nervous. And he said, I see you're nervous, Kikki. I'm going to sit on row 2. This is where I'm going to sit. Just give the talk to me. And this is something you can do with friends and colleagues in the room too. Have them sit in a place where you can look at them, where they can nod to you. I often do that with my students. I try to be a calming presence in the room, try to smile and nod, and make sure that there is a home down in the audience that they can relate to. I'm not showing this picture just to show a bunch of pictures of myself standing with my arms up talking, but there's one take home from this, and that's the lady wear blacks, or she wear blue. And when you're going and giving a lot of lecture tours, well, maybe that's not such a big problem for you guys in the room. Usually during the summer school, people are really dressed up very nice usually. It's summer, it's Bergen. A lot of the guys shows up in nice jackets. The girls got summer dresses on like me today. We're enjoying ourselves. And I wish you could have been here. So you dress up for the event. And a friend of mine said, if you give a lot of talks, it's going to be different people all the time. Just wear the same thing 10 times in a row. You don't have to change your outfit every time. Of course, kind of wash it and press it and look good. But you don't have to change your outfit. So I have a whole section in my closet at home, which is like Kikki's talk outfits. So I can just take 3 of them out, plop them in a bag and be ready for a week if necessary. And then it's also the matter of the shoes. I'm going to tell you a long story very quick. But the first time I gave a scientific talk at a smaller meeting, my supervisor was in the room, and for some reason this year, the year of 1992, clog shoes was in fashion again. I don't know if you know what this is, but these are really, really like a plateau shoes. And I'm almost 180 tall, and I thought if I get them, my legs will look nicer. So I got those shoes. And I got up on stage, and I stood there and wobbled. And I realized I'm not going to be able to give my talk wobbling on these shoes. So I decided in the middle of the talk to just kick them off. And have you sometimes seen on TV when something is happening and you have that thing where something is going really, really slow, and they spooled everything down, and you just kind of, you're watching something happening? I watched my shoe start spiraling like this in the air, floating for a long time before it landed right in front of a French professor with a schmuck. It almost hit him. I'll never wear those kind of shoes again. And thankfully I'm a good friend of that professor today, but it was incredibly embarrassing. You might think this is a silly story, but trust me, it matters a lot that you feel good also with yourself when you're on stage. And it also matters that you have a strong ethos. The subject matter that you have, the content of your talk, the logos matter, and the public emotions, your pathos. And unfortunately, it's not always good that you are credible, that you are a scientist, or you have good content. If you want to make your science matter to people, to politicians, to school kids, you also have to speak to people's hearts. That's incredibly important. You have to have a good story, and you have to communicate it. You have to dare to offer yourself, and you have to show your commitment. And the art of speech is really a skill that carries the tag of rhetorics. So be yourself. Try to play on your own strengths. And maybe have good friends and colleagues telling you what are your strengths, what should you play on. Don't imitate others, because then you really lose your credibility. Decide what you want to achieve with the talk you're giving. What do you want the lecture to lead to? New knowledge? Do you want people to understand something? Do you want them to have knowledge to make decisions? And concentrate on one or just a few key messages. Don't try to give it all out at once. Tell what you want to talk about. Communicate and also summarize the points you want people to take home with them. Because a lecture is not dependent upon cool presentation tools. Try without sometimes. Try to use a whiteboard or a blackboard. Try to bring a prop, like a rubber duck or something from your lab, or maybe a book that changed your life. A good story well told definitely trumps PowerPoint. Think of your audience. What are they interested in, and what are they concerned about? How can you present your message so that they recognize themselves in it? Try to find out where you're going and who you're talking to, and try to talk to them and with them. Try to capture your audience's attention from the first moment. And sometimes that can be with a little presentation of yourself. Show that you know who you're talking to. And make sure to introduce yourself both professionally and personally, unless you already, of course, are presented by the meeting organizers. And try to break the ice. It's not about being comical or putting on a funny show, but sometimes a little personal story can definitely break the ice. And engage the audience with personal stories, or maybe people have stories that they can tell, or try to ask some questions. You might not get a response, but the fact of just asking a question starts the audience thinking about what you're asking. Think of a strong finish with a call, in my case, with climate, or call to action. And you can't practice enough before you give a talk. Practice in front of others. Be sure to get honest, constructive feedbacks. Work with your colleagues and have them look at your talks. So it's summer in Bergen. It's super nice now. This is a picture from the spring when we have Japanese cherry trees that are blossoming around Bergen. Now, these cherry trees have been imported from Japan. And in Japan, the blossoming cherry trees is a unique part of Japanese culture and tradition. Families and loved ones show up under the trees when they're blossoming, and it's a huge event in the Japanese society. Such a big event that for hundreds of years, the first day the cherry trees blossoms in Japan has been noted down by emperors and monks and politicians. 2 years ago, a colleague of mine in Japan, he recorded these first dates, the yearly blossom day for the cherry trees in Kyoto in Japan. And what we see here is from year 800 and up to 2016. And the scale at the other end is the yearly flowering day. So 90 is like then we're into March, 95 to 100 we're into April. And this data goes almost 800 years back in time. Now the oldest data is a little bit more scattered. And the blue line here is the average of the data. But from around year 1200 and up today, the data are almost every year for the first blossom day in Kyoto. And what we see is there's been changes. They blossomed earlier and later, and earlier and later. And what's that telling us is that climate has changed naturally. There might be years with volcanoes. There might be years where El Niño made the Pacific warmer. But from year 1800 and up until today, the Japanese cherry trees have blossomed earlier and earlier and earlier in the year. I think that for generations, people have just showed up earlier, not even thinking that they were indeed part of this enormous change that is happening all around the world, global climate change. That the Japanese cherry trees, both here in Bergen and in Japan, and maybe your own cherry trees or things that are happening in your country, things you care about, have all changed, and that climate change is occurring in many natural environments so slow that we're just actually showing up earlier, that we are just changing in a way our lifestyle, our hobbies, the way we conduct our lives, not really realizing this scary thing that is happening around us globally. I think that's why it's incredibly important to do outreach. We have to think about it as an integral part of who we are as scientists, an integral part of the entire research process itself, and not an isolated activity that comes after or in addition to research. It should be a fundamental part of our research. And why do we do it? Well, I have to end on a positive, good note, because sometimes you get invited as an expert. This is from a TV show in Norway where they had focus on saving the rainforest, and they brought Sting in to play. I had no idea he was coming, but I ended up sitting a whole hour backstage with Sting, where he was just strumming his guitar and singing da 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 early in the morning, and then it's worth it. So this has been personal. This has been a little bit my journey in terms of doing outreach. And it might not be your journey, but maybe you've gotten some points that you can take with you. And also have a look at some of the theory that I put out on MIT UIB under the module. And have a look at some of the questions that I want you to review before we meet in the Zoom session next week. Thank you.